Now, you'll recall that I talked about the Sydney Ducks, and I said that the fires that happened, San Francisco burned down no fewer than 6 times between the late 1840s and end of the 1850s. And Sam Brannan, as you know, was a newsman. He actually had the newspaper, the California Star, which predates the San Francisco Call Bulletin, the San Francisco Chronicle, or the San Francisco Examiner as daily newspapers. And what he ended up doing is that he was so horribly upset and traumatized by the corruption and by the crimes that were going on in San Francisco, particularly regarding the Sydney Ducks. If we just use the Sydney Ducks as an example, that gang that lit a bunch of fires and ended up, as I said, literally raping, pillaging, and stealing from robbing stores and individuals, etc., that he was so upset by this. And of course, this all predates the official San Francisco Police Department, that Sam Brannan actually called to order because of the big voice that he had in San Francisco. He ended up calling together about 200 businessmen. These are lawyers and doctors and merchants and people who had the best interest of San Francisco in mind. And what Sam Brannan did is he called together what is known as the Vigilante Committee of 1851. And so what the Vigilante Committee is vigilantism is essentially when people or a group of people take law into their own hands. Of course, that's illegal in and of itself. But with the San Francisco being kind of the wild, wild west in the early part of the gold rush, Sam Brannan felt that he had no other option but to call about 200 people together and ask them for help. And so they basically took the law into their own hands. And so it was very common that the Vigilante Committee would try people, like in court. And they would actually, again, here's the Sydney Ducks, right? And they would try these people in what is known as Portsmouth Square. And this is Portsmouth Square, an image of Portsmouth Square in 1850. And this was kind of the city center where people would get together. And so these 200 or so vigilante committee members would get together, they would try somebody for a crime, and if they were found guilty, they would hang them right in the city square, right in Portsmouth Square. And so what ended up happening, and it is no small matter, that Sam Brannan, who was the editor-in-chief and the owner, the proprietor of the California Star, Sam Brannan actually publicized this. And what he used the power of the pen, that is, the power of the newspaper, to advertise the fact that if people were caught committing crimes, they would be brought to justice in a hurry, and the justice would not be too kind to them. And so he would often publicize the fact that rapists and people who robbed and stole and lit fires would actually be not tolerated and would be hanged. And it was actually quite successful. The Vigilance Committee of 1851 was very successful because with a couple of trials and with Sam Brannan essentially publicizing this in his newspaper, what ended up happening is crime was deeply in the decline. And so after 3 or 4 or 5 months of the Vigilance Committee being really very literally vigilant and had attentive to crime and to dealing with crime and the whole kind of zero tolerance policy it had towards crime basically bottomed out. And so it kind of went away. I mean, not entirely, but very serious crimes went away. What you should know is that Vigilante Committee of 1851 was more or less disbanded after about 6 months or so of it being in effect. And then we see a resurgence of criminality happening in the mid 1850s. And so what you should know is that there was another vigilante committee that was actually established in 1856. And so, again, that was in an effort to really squash the criminal element that was happening. There was a resurgence of crime that happened in the early to mid 1850s. We see here an image of Portsmouth Square. And by the way, Portsmouth was the name of the ship, as you know, the USS Portsmouth that was in town. And that's how it gets its name, Portsmouth Square, named after the ship. But you can see here, if you look at the map of where it's located, literally at the corner of where Clay intersects at Kearny Streets. And so we have that going on. And so there was a lot of crime that went on. Brannan was helpful in squashing that crime. And the Vigilante Committee really made a stamp in the whole criminal element. And here it is now. What this basically says, you can see it. Here's June 9th, 1851, Vigilante Committee postings. And of course, Sam Brannan helped with this, but there's a warning sign. Notice is given that any person basically pilfering, stealing, robbing, or committing any acts of lawless violence will be summarily hanged. And it's signed essentially Vigilance Committee. So that was really a warning. I did say that the part of crime and criminality also happened. So you see, in the 1850s with the Sydney Ducks, we had an incident with harsh crimes happening, where people were literally bludgeoned and killed, and fires were set ablaze, etc. In the 20th century, and I use the Sydney Ducks as an example of the crime that happened where basically hoodlums were out basically creating all kinds of havoc, wreaking havoc with San Francisco and beating people up and raping and etc., robbing stores and individuals, etc. But in the 20th century, there was a problem with crime. A continuing problem with crime. And I use just one example of that kind of criminal element being a more, shall I say, sophisticated or white collar crime, as it's called. And I call your attention to the era of the 1906 earthquake. And in the 1906 earthquake, the mayor of San Francisco was a fellow by the name of Eugene Schmitz. And essentially, he had no business being mayor of San Francisco at all. He was really a man who was much more interested in music and not only playing music, but also being a purveyor of music. And Eugene Schmitz was actually deeply controlled by a man by the name of Abe Roof. Abe Roof, as you see here, this is a picture of him between 1907 and 1908, was a political boss, a very, very bright man, graduated from UC Berkeley early, very smart, went to law school at Boalt Law School, University of California, Berkeley, and graduated near the top of his class, very, very smart. But he did not use his good brains for good. He basically found himself in San Francisco and being the political boss. And what I mean by that is that although Eugene Schmitz was actually the mayor and was supposed to be more or less running the city, essentially Eugene Schmitz was the puppet and Abe Roof was the puppet master. And what basically happened in a nutshell is during the 1906 earthquake and its aftermath, Abe Roof took advantage of the situation, and there was all kinds of bribes that went on. He bribed the San Francisco supervisors. He bribed highfalutin San Francisco businessmen, and essentially really lined their pockets with cash in order to get to where he was going. A lot of deals were made on the second floor of restaurants up in dark, dingy rooms where he made his dirty deals, and to gain a lot of power in San Francisco and a lot of power he had. And so, as a matter of fact, that some of the people who he lined with, for whom their pockets were lined by Abe Roof, were so eager to please him and so desperate to get the money that he would be able to give them. They were actually called, for some crazy reason, the Paint Eaters. They were dubbed the Paint Eaters. In other words, they were so desperate for political prowess and to get rich and to make dirty deals that they would literally eat, so they say, figuratively, I would imagine, eat the paint off of a wall. That's how desperate they were to make dealings with Abe Roof. So this was white-collar crime. It was pretty serious crime in San Francisco. And Abe Roof and Eugene Schmitz ended up, committing these crimes, along with a number of other, as I said, political officials in San Francisco and businessmen, etc. What ended up happening was that Abe Roof was found guilty. He spent a year in the city and county of San Francisco jail, went off to San Quentin for a little while. And then later on, he was due to a technicality, his prison sentence was overturned, and he was actually let out of prison earlier. He was supposed to have served 14 years in the state penitentiary, but he didn't serve nearly that long. Really, the first year and a half or two, he was out on a technicality. But nevertheless, he did a lot of graft. And the trials that they held for Eugene Schmitz and Abe Roof were called the Graft Trials, Graft, Graft Trials of San Francisco, that went on just post the 1906 earthquake. I have a picture here of General Frederick Funston. Many of you know Funston Park, Fort Funston, where people walk their dogs and do skydiving, and you can see beautiful views of the Pacific Ocean off of Bailey City and San Francisco, looking down the coast towards Pacific and Half Moon Bay. Well, that place was named after General Frederick Funston. When the earthquake came in 1906, there was a lot of mayhem. There were a lot of problems. And what ended up happening was that while there was never martial law in San Francisco, it was always part of the San Francisco Police Department. But Frederick Funston came in, and I think you'll recall me saying that he actually tried to help break up some of the fires in San Francisco by dynamiting, and he created more problems than he actually solved. But what we know is that also during this time, when Eugene Schmitz was the mayor, again, Eugene Schmitz, I'm just going to go back, here he is. When Eugene Schmitz was the mayor, he basically said that if anyone was caught looting, robbing, committing any kind of crimes, they were ordered to be shot on the spot. And he ordered the San Francisco Police Department to do that. And there were even some military personnel in town trying to keep order, although martial law was never invoked. Never invoked. It was always the city and county that tried to deal with its business. If children were caught stealing and bashing windows in and stealing from stores, their punishment was to wear a placard around their necks to shame them. It was created to deeply shame them for their very bad acts of stealing, etc. So the police did not shoot kids, but they were told that they could shoot adults who were involved with any kind of criminal element. And so we have a history of criminality in San Francisco. I call it real criminality versus fake criminality. Not to go with the word fake. I don't want to take that too far. But what I would tell you is, many of you know from my previous lectures, particularly a lecture that I gave where I talked to you about, for example, the cubic air ordinance in San Francisco. Remember the 500 cubic feet of air that was supposed to be for each individual person, and if that was not achieved, the police could come in and arrest, and there could be a fine accompanying that. To me, that was nothing but straight up racism. That had nothing to do with public health. It really had nothing to do with people being involved in a criminal element, but it had to do more with the way that criminality was created or constructed in order to carry out racist laws and processes and procedures. And so that certainly is not the same as, say, the Sydney Ducks or the white collar crime that was created by Abe Roof or Eugene Schmitz. So we know about that, and I think that's kind of more bogus crime that the public health department set up, et cetera, as indicated in the Cubic Air Ordinance Act. But there are other kinds of acts too that were criminalized. I think I shared with you, like, for example, there was a lot of aim towards the Chinese, a lot of anti-Chinese sentiment. So, for example, there was not only the Cubic Air Ordinance, but there was also the shoulder pail law, in which Chinese could not carry more or less sticks across or dowels across their necks with buckets or baskets hanging from them, because it was thought that, in fact, those dowels across their necks to carry those two baskets of laundry, usually, or other items, could be used as a deadly weapon, and so they were outlawed. So it was, again, just a way of harassing the Chinese. And there are just lots of other things. Curfews, that the Chinese, there were curfews against the Chinese, that there was a lot of racism due to both real and imagined opium dens in Chinatown, for example. There were a number of ways in which the Chinese were discriminated against. And the San Francisco police and the public health folks would say that, well, they were breaking laws, but really were those were laws that were created really just to harass. And they are not the same as the kind of criminal element that took place, either white crime or the more brutal crimes that were conducted by folks like the Sydney Ducks. So I just wanted to kind of share that, and now I'm very much open to questions. So we'll see how this works. So it's now about close to 10 after 7. So we've been going for about 40 minutes or so, let's say 30 minutes at least, 35. Are there any questions about anything that I had said? If we just want to take a chance to unmute yourself and ask the question, that would be great.
The material you're covering tonight, will that be on the test next week?
I would like it to be. I would like it to be, because it's technically, and I hope I'm not going back on what I said, but let me give you my reasoning. I think, Mary, it would be because it's actually listed in the syllabus as a topic that should have occurred before the midterm. It's the one on criminality in San Francisco. So I would like that to be, if that would be okay.
Sure.
Okay. There anything else?
So our midterm is going to be posted on Canvas.
Yes, I don't know who's speaking because I only see 4 or 5 of you up there, but yes, let me just answer your question. Yes, it will be posted on Canvas. I am just now getting up to speed on Canvas, and so the midterm ought to be up on Canvas, and it will be given next week, and you'll be able to go in right at 6:30. Take it. Again, it will be very faithful to what I indicated last week in terms of the structure of the midterm. Be about 50 items, some true and false, multiple choice, that sort of thing.
Okay.
How long will we be given to complete the exam? Is there a certain amount of time that the window will be open?
Yes, it'll be open for 1 hour.
Okay. Since I have accommodations, will it still start at the same time, or will it end at?
If you have accommodations, here's what I'd like you to do, because I'm learning about all this. Not accommodations. I know plenty well about those, but I'm learning how to deal with this in Canvas. And so if you have accommodations, I will accommodate those. I believe I have notification from 2 members of the class. And what I'm allowed to do is to go into Canvas and actually set time. So if you're good for some of both of you have time and a half to complete the exam. So you will be given time and a half. And I will indicate that for the 2 individuals who have that accommodation.
Yeah.
So that's what I will do. And we'll see how this all works. I'm going to also put, I'm going to do my best to maybe put some other very small things on the Canvas in terms of assignments where you can get a few extra points or something like that. I'm just trying to keep this thing going.
And how would the group presentations work?
Oh, this is going to be very interesting. What I would ask of you is that how would they work? Okay, plan A would be for us to be able to see them much like I'm giving a lecture right now, and that you would go in and give a presentation on Zoom. Okay, barring that, and what's going to end up happening is that unfortunately, we will not be able to do a presentation per se, but the presentation will be basically more or less, unfortunately, a PowerPoint from each group that would be sent to me, and I would essentially assess it like that. But that's not ideal. That would be a distant plan B. But I'm hoping to really get up to speed and figure it out how it could be, because ideally we'd have the groups doing the presentations like this. So here's the other thing I think that we all know by now. I'm aware of what the governor said just yesterday. Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, basically said that he doesn't believe that the schools will be in until next fall. Again, I don't know that to be true, but I think at this point it should be very safe for us to assume that this is not going to be a 2-week thing or a 3-week thing or a month thing. I think that this mode of operation for us will continue through the spring. I have to believe, and I will plan for this kind of instruction, unfortunately for me and for many of you, having to be carried out in this kind of a fashion. And because I don't believe that I don't know, but I really sincerely believe that we're going to have to go through the very end of the semester in this kind of a modality. Mm-hmm. So that's the long way of answering your question. Plan A is to figure out some way where you could actually give the presentation, much like I'm giving the presentation now to the whole class. If that does not work for some reason, then I'd have to arrange it where you would submit it via the Canvas. And I would have to go in and look at what you've done and then be able to assess your presentation based on that.
Okay.
Let me also at least recognize that that right now I am really in a bind in terms of figuring out, it's just very difficult for the groups to do its work without actually physically being able to get together to do the work. Now, maybe I'm overplaying that. I just don't know. My fear is that doing the group projects in a remote kind of way is just a very difficult way of pulling this thing together. And can I hear some of your good thoughts on that? I just don't know.
Yeah, I think it is difficult to do like group projects where you can't see each other like in person, because also like internet doesn't always work or have service, and like it's not like we can meet up in person in a lot of locations now because the whole like stay in place.
Everything's closed.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know quite what to do. I really don't. I mean, I am also willing at this point to be very flexible. I have to be. I just don't want to create any more stress. I want to make this as good of a course as I can possibly do, given what we've got. Luckily, we had several good weeks together, and we're going to need to finish this out in this kind of a way. I hate to turn the boat around and to completely disrupt what you've been doing. But if the group projects are going to be such a problem, it may be we have to abandon that idea and move to shorter type assignments or just stuff like that, so I can have enough assessment in order to give you a grade at the end. And my problem is I just don't know how functional it is for you to work in groups remotely, because we're literally in a lockdown order right now. There's a shelter in place. I see this going on for at least about a month, at least. So given that, I don't want to put more stress on you, but I'm not experiencing the group projects the way you are. So I need a little guidance in terms of what I need to give me some advice. I will take it under advisement, and then I'm going to make some decisions. Who would like to speak to that?
Oh, I'm about to speak. This is Dakari. So if we already start working on the project, I mean, can we still present it like you were saying, like the same way we're doing it now? If it's already kind of like working on it, instead of like getting rid of it and then trying to do something completely different? Or no, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay.
Well,
like another way we can also just like putting it up on YouTube.
Yeah.
On YouTube.
Making a video? Oh man, that's
I feel like that's difficult with a lot of people. I feel like what would make sense is like doing a presentation like this where we have like one person like share the screen or whatever, and then like the people in the group are the ones who are going to be unmuted, and then when it's their like turn, they talk. But it might be like a little shorter because also it's going to be difficult to like have that one person know when to go to the next slide. So it might be a little choppy and not the best presentation.
Well, what if we all send our slides to the professor, and then that way he can still review them, but then show them for us, like while we present it, and like he flipped through them? Or is that too much? Yeah.
But know whose turn is what. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. This might be a little choppy, but like that's what might have to happen, you know?
I mean, I got an idea, but it might be a stretch. You can just give us an A, right? Just give us an A. This is a stretch.
I like that.
Yeah.
May not be such a stretch.
Yeah. Or B.
With everything going on right now, it will be nice.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, not only that, some people like me, because I'm working as an essential service, I still have to work, but others might have to have more free time to do it. It's hard to coordinate with other, they want to work at a certain time, others still have to work somewhere else. So there's my little tough on that part too.
Yeah, right now I work at Sprouts. They're demanding hours, so we've been working 10 to 12-hour shifts lately.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I work in a dental office, and so we close for 3 weeks, but my doctor, because it's private practice, isn't able to pay us for the 3 weeks. So I have to find another job. So that's also another thing that's like
the same. So I did that. You could file on for unemployment online now, I'd recommend giving yourself a lot of time to do it though, because the website crashes a lot, and so it took over 2 hours.
It took me forever to try and fill it out, but I'd rather try and find another job than have to wait for EDD.
Okay.
But it's a good idea.
Costco and Safeway are hiring too, like on the spot.
Yeah,
So,
they are.
Okay, so here's what I'd like us to think about, and this is really helpful for me, and I don't want this to get into pandemonium. So here's what I would like. I think what would be really good is for us to think as flexibly as possible, to give people the flexibility they need to be okay in their lives and to also get something out of this class. So if it becomes such a difficult thing to be in a group, then at this late time, I would certainly permit people to do a paper as like a couple of, like 4 or 5 others of you are doing in the class.
I think it's also really hard right now.
No, I think it's also at this moment, let the group decide whether or not we want to continue with the presentation or the paper, because we choose the topic. We have a head start on some of the stuff, but let's decide it, like if we can't do a presentation because we have so many times on it and we have so many information, we can just put it together and send it as a PowerPoint or something, so we can show you what we have been doing. And we can still discuss about whether or not we can do or we just find an alternative doing a presentation or some other software or some stuff like that. I think,
I think
or hold on. If one of you has to, or 2 of you in the group have to work, then maybe 1 or 2 of you would be willing to present it to the class on the format like with which I did this lecture. Mm-hmm. I'm suggesting we have to do that. But I'm saying for those of you whom it's a huge hardship to continue with the group given a situation, that I would like to be able to have you communicate with your group saying, look, I can't do this anymore. What I'm going to do is jump off the train and do a paper. It doesn't mean that the rest of you need to do a paper. You could do the group project. I want to give people ample flexibility without making us go entirely crazy either. And that can happen too, where it gets so flexible that it gets crazy making. I don't want that to happen, but I also want to give a little flexibility. So my idea would be that you would have the choice about whether or not you would continue with the group project. And you can certainly do that. And if you can't continue with the group project for whatever reason, you would talk to your group first, so your group is fully informed, and you'd write me an email. It would work out that you would do a paper or something along those lines. But
then for the groups, let's just say like some people like leave. Does that mean that the project doesn't have to be as long as like if everyone was still in it then? Or do we just have to make up for the time?
Sure. No, you don't have to make up time. We would invoke the flexibility clause. So, instead of an hour or 45 minutes, it could be a half hour. And a half hour really would be minimal. I mean, you simply need that amount of time,
And I know that like we all want answers because we're all confused, but just keep in mind, we all got thrown into like quarantine. So we're all kind of like confused at this point. So yeah, we just got to be as flexible as possible because it's hard to have any kind of answers at this point.
Of course. And I don't want to throw this into craziness. In fact, that would not be a good scene. So I'm going to give some limited choices and that'll be it, or else it'll get too crazy. And I think you all know that. It will get too out of control.
I just have one question. It's either the presentation or the individual papers. That's the only 2 choices, right?
At this point, I think that's right.
I just want to make sure. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I think let's the group member decide whether or not they want to continue or not. I think it's up to the group. We have each people's contact number, so let's do all the talking and then we figure out something. We email you.
I think that's absolutely right. I think the groups need to huddle, figure out what's happening, and I'm totally great with groups continuing and presenting it like a lecture, like I just presented this thing tonight. So that would be perfectly fine. And for those of you who want to do a paper, we can do that. One thing that I do want to get in the next couple of weeks, it's a pretty clear indication about who's doing what. Kind of regroup, and so I have that for my record. So I'll figure that out and get back to you on that next week. So.
And then so next week it's just going to be the midterm on Canvas. There's going to not be like lecture or anything.
Yeah, I'm still considering that. I mean, I think that many of you, so my experience giving this exam is that most people are done in a half hour. Okay. Mm-hmm. We have 2 people who need an hour and a half. So that takes us to 8 o'clock. And so I'm considering right now whether to have a little something at 8 o'clock, or what I'm also considering is to actually have you watch a little film on YouTube and then write a little half-page reaction to it with a couple of pointed questions. Instead of us holding class like we are right now, you would respond to that and then submit those via Canvas.
You could always lecture for like half an hour before the test, like have it open, like say at like 7:15 or 7:30 or whatever, and then we go until 9 if it's going to be an hour and a half.
That's another idea. Certainly. I'll consider that. Oh my God. Yeah, I
can't do that.
I have a professor who still hasn't even updated us on anything. So it's like, do we still have class? I don't know.
I'm sorry. Yeah, this is quite a challenging time. It really, really is. I'm doing my best, as you know, and I will continue to try, and I'm still learning the technology part. I don't even know whether this is being video recorded. I guess I'll know in a while. But, yeah, we're doing our best. And so, yes. Are there any other questions or concerns?
I appreciate the fact that you learned all these systems for us, Professor.
I agree.
Thank you.
And I like the bridge in the background.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, it took me a half hour to climb up to this hill. And so, how do I find out how many people are here? Is there a way? I just
it tells you. Can go to participants. There's 20.
Oh, I see. 20 of you. I see. Oh,
you can see the name.
I see it. Yep. Here it is.
Are there 20 people in our class?
Well, there's a little bit.
There are actually there 30. There are 30. There are exactly 30 people. Anyway, are there any other comments or questions? So can you think of another alternative besides the group project or a term paper? Is there anything else you can consider?
I think those are the best options, and it's the easiest.
I think so. And keep that simple as and then we will do some kind of a final quiz at the end. Mm-hmm. And it'll be the same kind of thing as the midterm. So that's what we'll do. And I may give you, in lieu of like lecture, I may spend a half hour lecture and then say, okay, now I want you to see a little film, and I want you to write a half page on something to fill in the rest of the time, just to make this as thoughtful as possible. And that's what I'm planning on doing as well. So you can expect something like that in the coming weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
The other thing I will do for you is give you at least 2 more half classes. So we'll only meet, say, from 6:30 to 7:30, and then maybe or 6:30 to 7:45, and then all of you can have time in groups to use that time to make phone calls or Zoom or whatever it is that you need to do to help you along. And for those of you who are writing term papers, you can use that time to work on your term papers. So we'll kind of do this as we go. Take it a week at a time.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Was the lecture clear to all of you tonight?
Yeah.
The audio cut in and out.
The audio was kind of funky.
Oh.
Sound like you were underwater at times.
The slides, since the audio was a little off, do you think you would be able to do that?
Oh yeah, well, hopefully I'll definitely do that, and hopefully, how does it sound now? How do I sound?
The past 10 minutes been good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So it may have to do with the connection or something, but yeah, I will. So hopefully, so my hope is this got recorded, and if it got recorded, I'm going to actually send all of you the link to the recording with the slides. All of this will be memorialized.
Oh, okay.
Oh, perfect.
In the video. If for some reason the video failed because I didn't do it correctly, what I'll promise you is I will send you all via email the PowerPoint for tonight's presentation. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we'll call it a night.
Okay.
Unless you have any other questions or concerns.
I think
No, thank you.
Nope.
Anything at all?
Stay healthy.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying. Thank you. And all of you too. We have to hang tight together with this. This is pretty unprecedented. I mean, people who are even 80, 90 years old who lived in San Francisco all their lives cannot remember a time when this sort of thing has actually happened. We're in some pretty interesting waters right now.
We're living through a history textbook time right now.
We
For
are.
real, though. We are.
Yes. Yes. But this is how you get an epidemic under control, though. They're doing the right from a public health perspective. They're doing all of the tracing and the epidemiology and all of it. It's actually, this is tried and true stuff when you're dealing with the pandemic. So we're in pretty good shape.
Yep.
Great.
Okay, well, you all take good care. And if you have any questions individually, go ahead and email me and I'll respond, of course. So I really appreciate you hanging in there with me and with the course, and at least we had a nice little session tonight. This was better than I could have even imagined would happen. So here we are.
Yay.
Yep.
All righty. Stay safe, everybody.
Everybody.